G'day, welcome back to Brupeg. We're about to press off north up the coast to Gladstone. We've just wrapped up the work that we've done with TS Bundaberg with the Navy cadets here in Bundaberg, our first project. We're about to head up to Gladstone. We've got cadets coming on board Brupeg in Gladstone in a couple of weeks' time. There's a heap of work that we need to do to get Brupeg seaworthy for our first long distance sea trial. It's an 80-mile, or in our case 13-hour journey. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it works out.
Brupeg was a sunken fishing trawler that was stripped out and ready for the scrapyard. She's just completed a 10-year rebuild that's brought her back to life. With the help of volunteers and funded by our Patreons, community and subscribers, she'll be crewed by passionate people from around the world. If you'd like to be involved and support the project, please consider joining us on Patreon or subscribe to the channel. There's a link in the description below.
Now, there's so much that's been going on in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to basically show you what's been going on in the background because there's so much happening that it's hard to keep you guys up to date. So that's what I'm going to try and do this week.
From day one, Project Brupeg has been about giving back to others. One of the first groups that we've been able to donate sea time to was the Australian Navy Cadets. As you've seen, we've just wrapped up a month-long project working with the Australian Navy Cadets here at TS Bundaberg. It's been an awesome experience for us, and the Navy has asked us to keep training cadets all the way up the Queensland coast as we head north, which means a lot of preparation on our part, as Brupeg is about to steam out of these heads for the last time as we head north. As part of our shakedown cruise heading north, we don't know what's going to break down on the boat, and we're going to assume there will be breakdowns. So we need to have access to parts, people, equipment and materials to be able to repair the boat. So that's why we're going to be hugging the Australian east coast for the next 1,000 miles.
As many people know, Australia's got quite a long list of monsters that make life relatively challenging for those that try to live here. Whether that's sharks or crocodiles or snakes or koalas or territorial magpies or spiders or anything else that wants to bite you, we're not really worried about that because we've got enough insect spray that we think we can keep those away. However, this stuff doesn't work when it comes to cyclones.
This is a map of cyclones over the last 40 years. You can see there's a band around the equator that's pretty safe, and there's a band around where we are or below that's also quite safe. We need to get out of that cyclone region in time to wait out cyclone season, and that's why we're pushing to head to the northern end of Australia.
And that's the reason why there's a sense of urgency for us to get going. At the time of recording, it's the 20th of October. Cyclone season starts the 1st of November and runs through to the end of April. So it's quite a long season. However, the start and the ends can often sort of be tailed off, and it is a little bit cautious. The fishing boats, like what Brupeg used to be, fishing season closes, but they basically take a break for 3 months over the end of the New Year period. So December, January and February, we're going to do exactly the same. So we're going to be in the Torres Straits December, January, February, above that cyclone line. So right from the start of buying Brupeg and spending 10 years rebuilding her, we've always had a bucket list of places that we'd love to see on this planet. And one of the places on Jess's bucket list has been the Great Barrier Reef. The place is incredible. It's 2,500 kilometers long, and we're going to be traveling the full length of it. It's the largest living organism on the planet. Now, it does suffer a lot. During summer, it often suffers from coral bleaching, so there's a huge amount of research going in to see if this ecosystem can be maintained and survive into the future. So now that you know where we're going, let's show you how we're going to get there. Reliability is going to be a big deal for these projects. We need the boat to be absolutely rock solid, so we've been doing a lot of testing of our systems. In the background, you might be able to hear the little genset exhaust down there chuffing away. For the last 2 weeks, we've been running the boat as if we're out at sea with no contact to the shore. The electrical system that we installed into Brupeg has been working flawlessly. This thing is an absolute beast of a system. Incredible amounts of power available, huge amounts of storage. We have around about a day and a half of battery storage if we have no charge whatsoever going into the boat, and that's running everything: air conditioning, induction cooker, jugs, kettles, you name it, fridges. We don't really hold back on power use, and we've got about a day and a half of storage. We can charge the batteries from around 15% up to around 90% in about 2 hours with the generator. We don't have to use the generator that often though, because the solar is covering all of our daytime loads. So whenever there's sun, we're able to get a pretty decent amount of power out of our solar system. We have, however, found one niggly little problem, and it's very specific to the way Brupeg's system is set up. Because we have two large inverters, each of them have a minimum amount of current that they will pull from the grid whenever they're plugged into shore power. Now, if we had a single inverter, we can dial that right down to 10 amps. The power that we have from the shore power is a maximum of 15 amps, so on a single inverter that would be fine. Because we've got two of them, it means that minimum is now 20, so it always pulls too much power from the shore power, and that's something that we're trying to fix. We thought we could do it quite simply in the Victron software. We've bought the whiz-bang dongle that allows us to plug into the system and then downloaded the software onto our PCs. We've gone through and we've looked at every setting that we can. We're about halfway through being able to solve it, we think. It's not something that you can just say, you know, take less than 15 amps. Normally you would think it would be as simple as that, but because we've got two inverters set up as parallel, we have to think of them as one large inverter, and for whatever reason the software is just not as flexible as we thought. So we're trying to find workarounds to basically make sure that we can keep our maximum power draw from shore power below 15 amps. When we're not plugged into shore power and we're running off solar and generator, as we would be if we were at sea or on anchor, there's absolutely no issues. The system works perfectly well, and that's part of the motivation for doing our longer term testing over the last couple of weeks. Running the boat on the generator is we know we're going to have to do that anyway, so we may as well just drop the shore power until that is resolved and test the systems as if we're at sea.
So behind the scenes, all the work that happens that you won't probably see on the channel very much. Sorting out paint. When we first did the paint in the Bilge, we didn't have any money at all, and we had to accept what we could afford, which was single pack, and we wanted to trial it and see if it worked. We kind of knew it wouldn't, but like many things on Brupeg, we've just done what we had to do at the time, knowing we would change it. So we had a bit of rust come through, a bit of water got underneath the paint, and we had a bit of rust, so Damien's needle gunned and sanded, painted, and it's looking great. So now it's got 2-pack, as it should have always had. One of those things you have to accept on a project like this. But yeah, you can see the floorboards. That's what it's like. Those are hatches that we've cut out so we can access the Bilge whenever we need to. But you can see the pipes from the front tanks that run underneath the floorboards of the Bilge that head towards the engine room.
So this pipe here is a stainless 1-inch ID pipe, and that actually goes through our water tank and right to the very front of the boat, and there's one on the other side there as well. You can see there's one on either side. They basically go to either of the forward fuel storage tanks, and then they travel along the floor all the way underneath the centerline here to the engine room, which is that bulkhead there. There's a freezer just in front of the bulkhead. That's the bulkhead there. And then they basically go through the bulkhead, and we can put fittings on there to transfer fuel around in the engine room.
We need to take a step back in time. A couple of months ago when we did the electrical install, we created a problem we didn't know existed with Brunet. What do you reckon you found?
So if you bring the camera here, Damien, so Damien had spotted, I don't know if you can see that too well, so that wire clearly has got very hot. There's the wire's got to the point where it's melted and broken, and there's the insulation, which is obviously melted off it. Now, that wire is actually from the ground from the alternator.
Right.
So it clearly has got very hot, and I think our thinking is correct that we've had a ground path temporarily from the alternator coming back through. I've got a ground bus sitting here, but it's come back through that wire that's melted.
Yep.
And I'm just having a look, I don't know if you can see it up here. So that wire there clearly has got hot. It's a thicker wire, so it hasn't, basically the other wire has blown like a fuse.
Yeah.
This other wire, that's the wire going down to the oil pressure sensor, which is the one grounded to the engine block.
Right.
So it has got hot. We're going to have to replace it anyway because we're putting the active oil pressure sensor in there now.
Yep.
So we'll replace that wire with a 3-wire bundle.
Yep.
And I cannot see any other damage.
Great.
I'm pretty confident that's the ground loop that we thought might have happened.
Okay.
But what I will also be doing, it all looks a great mess here. Again, it's prototype and I haven't bound it all up, but after we do the work now, actually we can bind it all up.
Okay.
This is the optocoupler that we talked about before. So, and these are the tachometer wires coming in, and then the idea is that they're decoupled optically. So you can see there's no damage there because there's no ground path through there.
Yeah, lovely.
I'm reasonably confident at this point that this board is okay. It wouldn't have formed part of the ground loop.
Okay.
And this is what we will replace with the isolated grounds, which sounds like a contradiction. They're isolated 0-volt references, so that 0 volts and the 5 volts will be different to the 0 volts going back up to the wheelhouse with the 12-volt new 12-volt system.
Yeah, lovely.
So that'll be, so we'll be isolated there, we're isolated there, and we're about to go through and make sure all of the sensors on the engine block are isolated. So we'll go through and measure those too. So number one,
Wonderful.
we need to rerun wires to the alternator and down to the oil pressure sensor.
So what we're doing, we've fitted a new sensor. We've got rid of the old VDO style sensor, the big round one. We've got a nice new stainless one in there. It's exactly the same sender as what we have for our gearbox over the back. So we're transitioning sensors to be all exactly the same. So if ever one breaks, we've got plenty of spares. That's a 3-wire sensor now instead of a 2-wire resistance based sensor. It's now a voltage based sensor. So bringing these are the 3 new wires for that. So bringing everything back up. This is the loom that we created. We're just now stitching everything back together so that it's neat, back into the box, and we're starting to rewire the box.
So the burnt wire was when we're monitoring the 24 volts off the alternator. But because the red arc can only deal with 12 volts, then there was a little voltage divider that we built at the time. And part of that is you need a ground reference. And so that just happened to be in the critical path of when it smoked. With the new servo system, we shouldn't need to monitor the 24 volts separately. We should be able to do it over the network. So we've just disabled that whole, taken that bit of the circuit out actually, so it doesn't exist anymore.
After an afternoon of mucking around, we've got our sensors in, we've got our the start of our loom tidied up, coming back up to the top here. I'll turn that back on. We've started disconnecting a lot of things. We've got the new power supply in, things that aren't needed are coming out, and we're tidying up what will be left in there, so this will get cleaner and cleaner as we go. But a good sort of afternoon. We've eliminated most of the damage. We've found a lot of the burnt cables. You can see bits of them left over still, but we found them, understood what's going on, and we've started to remove all of those. We've got so much going on at the moment, it's kind of a bit hectic. Jess is editing up an episode that we are currently very late on because we've been so busy we haven't been able to do it on our normal time.
And crazily, a few other projects are in the works at the moment, so we've been doing appointments and finding out about that, so that's happening in the background as well.
This computer's been flat out with Zoom meetings. This computer's been flat out actually doing Brupeg's channel.
It's good, it's not something I'm complaining about, just squeezing everything in, but it'll be a long night, that's all that's.
Where we're up to on all of our wiring is we're very much stripped down our loom now, so we know what happened. The earth path was the alternator, so the part that failed was essentially the negative cable that goes from the alternator up to the brunette box up here. That's been repaired, we've removed a lot of it, but we've also started to add in fuses, so we're actually going to be fusing both positive and negative, so that should anything else ever fail, it blows a fuse rather than starts burning brunette out. A lot of these gauges here are starting to become redundant, so we're going to be swapping over to a digital readout for our start bank battery voltage. Yeah, and half of these cables are actually getting stripped away because they're no longer needed, so there's a lot of evolution happening in this box at the moment. So we're going to be doing, these are 1 amp fuses, we're going to be doing a positive and negative block so that we can eliminate all possible chances for cabling to fuse out, but we need to common these up, so we've bent these over, so they normally come like that. You can see the tabs straight up for a blade connector. We've bent these over and we're going to get a piece of 6mm conductor, so we've got
bend these up.
Fairly chunky conductor. They'll get soldered onto there like so, and then that goes off to our power converter. So we're doing exactly the same on this one, but we're just doing one as a test. So we've got another meeting happening in a couple of minutes, but I need to go down to the chandlery, and the fastest way at the moment to get down to the chandlery is with a little dinghy.
As a competitive sailor, I know that it's 4 minutes and 33 seconds to go from Brupeg to the marina via the dinghy, and it's substantially longer than that if I take the car. Therefore boats win. Less than 5 minutes later.
Parts acquired. Let's get back to the boat. My background is in racing very fast sailing skiffs, and I find these techniques come in as transferable skills when driving this dinghy. When it's dead flat like this and you need to go absolutely flat out, I find sitting on the transom with the outboard at full noise, allowing as much boat as possible to come out of the water, achieves the highest speeds available. In this dinghy we can get 26 knots. So Duncan's gone and soldered these. They've come up really beautiful like that, and then so that they're sealed off, we're putting liquid electrical tape. If you've never seen this, it's basically like you can almost paint it on essentially. It comes with a brush, but you can basically paint it on and it seals off any sort of ability for moisture to get in, but also seals off the ability for these to start arcing out on anything and causing issues.
So we've come up from the engine room for a bit of fresh air. We've sort of analysed where the return path ground through the brunette has happened. So basically this was a junction that we'd created which essentially connected the alternator ground back to the ground being used by the red arc system. And you can see here where things have got quite hot. So it would seem what's happened is just temporarily that became the main ground path, probably with the alternator trying to charge the starter batteries.
You might be thinking, what does this all mean? We've put a lot of electronics into Brupeg, and does that mean that they're not reliable? Can we not rely on them into the future? And nothing could be further from the truth. What's actually happened here is when we put the new Victron system in, Simultaneously, we had an oil sensor fail, and that caused Brunette to become grounded to the engine, which meant that some of the start current when we started the main engine ended up going through one of the tiny little sensor cables on Brunette. So we've fixed the issue, we've replaced all of the cabling, we've also put fuses in every single line, positive and negative, on Brunette, so there's no way that this can happen in the future, and we've also changed out the sensors to a much more robust sensor. So we're glad that this has happened, because it means we're able to make the system much more stronger than we ever thought we needed to. Alright, so fully potted. These guys are just waiting for them to dry. They're dry-ish. That one's drier than that one's a wee bit tacky. We're just going to leave those for now, and we're going to go down and gut all of the superfluous gauges and cables out of the box. So what's roughly going? It's most of this stuff here, isn't it?
Basically, it's going to be all of that.
Yep.
And that.
Okay.
And associated cables.
Fantastic.
What we do want to keep is the tachometer.
Yep.
As one of the essential gauges, and the gas gauge down on the engine block for the oil pressure.
That half bucket of cable and all of the stuff on the ground has come out of that box there, so it still looks a little messy, but oh my god, it's getting tidier. So we've stripped down a lot of the cabling out of this loom. We had big adapters up here to try and house two sensors. We don't need two sensors now, so we've reduced it to a single manifold air pressure sensor, so that's nice and neat and lovely, and it's straight into the manifold. Oil pressure, we had a big adapter system, like a big T-piece thing, so we can have a sender out here and a sender up here. We don't need any of that. We've got one stainless sender going straight into the block. We don't have a bung, but we've got rid of all of the cabling for this sender. We don't need that sender anymore. So we have a single sender just there, coming through for our oil temperature. Water coming over here. Actually, come this way. We've got a single sender going into our thermostat housing. We used to have a big manifold thing that was an ugly big thing up here to house two senders. Don't need that anymore. This one here is no longer needed. That's coming out as soon as we can get a bung to fit that. I've just put the floorboard down. I forgot to show you on camera, but down there we had two senders. Let me show you them. It was that. So we've got temperature sender at each end, and this here went into the keel cooling pipes. All of that is no longer needed. We got rid of the whole lot and managed to just put one sender straight in, so that's massively simplified the water system. We've got our two positive negative fuse blocks which are about to go in tomorrow morning. We'll put them in here and we'll start tidying all of this up. That there, all of that is going. We don't need any of that, so yeah, it's getting massively simpler. Alright, we're getting very close to getting Brunette fired up, so one of the next jobs that I'm going to take on is getting some more sensors put in. So one of the sensors that Brunette has is fuel filters. So we have a sensor before and after our fuel filter. Bang. And what that allows us to do is on the bridge we'll be able to tell how full or blocked the fuel filters are. So very important when we're steaming in rough and crappy weather. So on Brupeg we have two fuel filters. We've got a left and a right fuel filter, and then we've got our fuel gauge down here. So this one here measures up to 8.7 psi of pressure, and then over the back we have a second gauge, and that one measures up to 14 psi of pressure. So basically we have a differential potentially between these two. So normally sitting here we've got just over 2 psi of fuel pressure, and that's the gravity from the tanks. So we can swap these here in and out at sea, so we can have one running and then this one can be disconnected. We can rebuild this with a new filter and then swap them back over, so we don't have to stop the engine while that happens. So this side is running, this side is shut off at the moment. What we do have also is some sensors here. So we've got one here, and we also have one just there, so that electronically we can read this number up on the bridge. So if this ever fails, we've also got the manual gauge, as you can see, so that there's sort of no way that this can really cause us a problem and stop the boat. What these two gauges allow us to do is read the differential between them. So essentially if we're seeing, say, a drop of 2 psi across the filters, so it might be, say, 10 at the start and 8 psi on the engine side, that might be the normal setting. I'm just using round numbers here, but that might be the normal setting. If we see 10 at the start and then it drops down to 2 on the other side, we know that that filter is starting to get blocked. So up on the bridge, we've got a little algorithm that tells us the percentage of blockage in those filters. So we know that if it gets to, say, I don't know, 40, 50% blockage, we definitely have to go down and deal with that, swap the filters over, put a new filter in, etc. So normally in an engine on a boat when they're running, if the filter blocks up, the engine stops. That's a big problem, particularly on a motorboat. So for us, we can see that problem before it actually occurs, so we can go down and deal with it before it stops the motor and becomes a real issue. This also means that because of our hot swap system, if we carry lots of spares, in theory we can just keep indefinitely changing those filters out and not have a problem. Even if we end up with dirty fuel, we can just keep changing filters out and not damage the engine. Our new side cutters have arrived, so That's going to be really handy when we're doing these small cables.
Can I use those on the CPU board?
Yeah, do you have any more resistors you need to take out?
I do. That middle one right there.
I had a minute, so I water blasted the jelly ramp. We just want to leave things nice and tidy for these amazing guys, and then we had a chance to do the boat.
So anyone that's lived on a boat for a while will know the dinghy conundrum of anti-foul or not. We have an anti-fouled, and look at that, it's kind of feral under there. So we have to pull it out of the water every maybe 4 weeks or so, 6 weeks roughly, and we water blast all of that junk off the bottom of the boat. Donk. It's not that bad, it's just weed mostly, eh?
Grows fast.
Does grow super fast. So there you go, this is pretty normal. It's not like super bad or anything. There's lots and lots of weed and things like that. A few barnacles, like here and there's a few barnacles. But mostly it's pretty good, it's just gross weed. That'll come off easy with a water blast.
When you're having cat on board, they have to be able to get out of the water if they fall in. She's done so 3 times now. This is our solution, just a milk crate with some climby stuff, grippy stuff on around it, but it does need to be cleaned off as well. It does get a bit of growth, and we just take this with us and we tie it to the wharf wherever we go.
Pretty tidy in here, as you can see. So this lot came out of this box yesterday, and a lot of this here gets tied into our new boards. So we've got, these are the boards that the fuse boards that we made yesterday. So we've got this completely sealed off and isolated, even though it looks like it's can be earthed, it can't be earthed. There we go, positive and negative fuse blocks in, and I've put cable glands top and bottom to help with cable management, because there's going to be a lot of that in here. And then I've made up this loom. You can see this is the actual plug, so I can take that off there. Rubber gasketed plug, so it's very waterproof style plug, which is quite nice. We've got stainless senders, and then heat shrunk onto chafe protection, as well as the cabling inside it. So, and then all of that ends up in hard conduit here, so we're going to run that back to the brunette box. There we have cable going up, P-clamped across, zips all the way along here, and then comes back, does a loop over here. We've got it going across the roof, down the side and into the box, and there is positive and negative to supply 5-volt power to our sensors, and then we've got sensor 1 and sensor 2. Put the fuse back in upstairs. This is the first time we powered brunette up since we nuked it, so we are testing to make sure we got 12-volt power down here, which we...
Okay, so there's
13.
13.2. We've got the new isolated supply connected up now, and then going through to the new 12-volt bus there, sorry, 5-volt bus there, and our new local ground.
So we're a bit more progress. You can see we've got quite a few of these now plugged in, so positive and our negative, and they're fused. The processor board is now in and powered up, and Ethernet is plugged in, so Dunk hits the switch under there. We should see lights. Look at that. Lights and no smoke. That's how you check it's done right. Basically got everything except for our fuel filter wired in, exhaust gas temp and RPM. That's for this gauge here. But yes, we're getting very, very close. So now we're starting to see the data flow through onto the computer.
There's a lot of data. I don't know if you can see that. Here's all the electrical data, and there are just pages and pages of that coming in from the new power system.
Yeah.
Engine oil pressure's a tad higher than I'd like to see it.
For an engine that's not running.
Yeah, correct. So we might just check we've got the right connections on that one. So coffee, couch and calibration, the 3 C's.
Yeah, so this is our old dash, and we're going to do a little bit of playing and get some new gauges and things in, but we'll go and see if we can make it work and look a little bit prettier. So this is basically the background of our dashboard on brunette, so we can drag and move and change things. So
just flick there, that's
the dashboard that we have at the moment. And then when we go back,
and they're the cameras which are disconnected right now.
And then when we go back to the behind the scenes, you can sort of see this is where things are. So we've got like start voltage, start current, oil pressure, oil temperature, and you can sort of move them around, make them bigger or smaller, change them to do what you want and what you want the layout to be.
So we're just concentrating right now on getting all the engine data collected here. And then once we've done that, we'll rearrange the electrics.
Nice. So we've got all of our oil on that, all of our engine on that right hand side.
That looks good, doesn't it?
That's really cool. We're on some of the last cabling, so we're hooking up the tacho to the switched power supply, so that it's obviously switched on and off when the gauges and brunette and everything are switched on and off. we've gone through and paid particular attention so that we don't create any ground path. So Brunette as a system is above ground, so basically it means that every sensor, every cable, every connection is isolated from the boat. And then in here we've done quite a bit of tidying up. We've still got a lot more to go, and then we've got to do conduit and things like that, but we're getting close to almost being able to close this box up and head upstairs and start doing some programming to make the wiring that we use look tidy. We basically use this conduit here. It's just a nice sort of flexible conduit. So we take our loom and then we put a heat shrink at the end of it, slide our conduit up into the heat shrink like that, so around all the cables and up into the heat shrink, and then seal it all up. And what you end up with is something basically like this. So you've got like a conduit with a heat shrink onto your plug, so it's really stiff. You can pull anywhere on this conduit here, and it's going to be holding onto the plug, so you're not going to be ripping this apart, you're not going to be pulling wires out of the end of your plug. It's just a decent way of making it really nice and robust. So in this case, because we need access to the plug, we're not going right up over the plug. With the resin infused heat shrink that we use, you can see a little bit of glue seeping out each end. It's basically hot glue, but it tells you that it's done.
You can just see it just started to affect the conduit there. So as soon as I saw that happen, I pulled back. We got all of the active and passive sensors plugged in there. The oil pressure, all temperature sensors. And then over on the other side of the board, we're going back to the exhaust gas temperature module here. But we know everything on this side works. And at the moment I've just been hooking up the tachometer, which comes from the alternator. So we're picking up the unregulated side of the alternator.
Duncan has closed the lid, so basically it's all tidy inside, everything's hooked up. We're ready to start the engine up, and Duncan's got a couple of jobs that's going to happen. Duncan's going to basically calibrate his gauges and make sure everything that is happening on the engine he's seeing on the dashboard. I need to do some work on the alternator, so I've got a little laser tester here, and this will tell me temperature. So when we run at idle, this alternator puts out 60 amps. Need to make sure it's not going to overheat. Now that we've got the belt guard and everything on, need to make sure that the temperature is manageable for the alternator. So we've got to run for about half an hour at idle, then we've got to run half an hour or so at cruise RPM, so sort of 1200, 1400 RPM, something like that. While that's happening, the lithiums will be charged via the Belmar regulator, so we'll be able to see all of the charge coming through the new Victron system as well. So this is sort of the final stages of engine electrical testing, I suppose you could say. Start up, we've got her in neutral, got the throttle down, let's go fire the engine up. So I've already gone around and done all the checks. The engine's a pigsty at the moment because we've been working on all the electronics, as you can see. But we're going to fire it up, and then we've got a fair bit of running to do. Starting. Here we go.
Setting a 30-minute timer so we know our testing is accurate.
Okay, so we've got the tack working, which is good, around the 600, which is your idle. Engine oil pressure, need to look at the gauge downstairs. Would it be?
That's about right, yep.
Yep, okay. It's not really warmed up yet.
Yep.
Gearbox was not really doing any work,
yep.
But there's the signal.
Yep.
EGT I would have thought would be a bit higher, so I think it's jammed on 0, so I'd say we lost our little board.
Alright, no worries.
And, well, we've got the raw data coming through for the fuel filter.
Right.
I've got to do a little bit of code to get the difference across the filter.
Okay, lovely.
Go back down and see what it's like after half an hour of the hardest conditions for an alternator idling along. .2, that's pretty good. Okay, so I'm just going to pop the revs up a bit higher because we need to simulate cruise RPM basically on the engine. And then we can look at what sort of temperature and what sort of amperage we're getting out of that alternator. The amperage will probably go up from 50 to
100, maybe 80, something like that, roughly. And what we need to do is make sure that the alternator doesn't start to overheat. It should actually be better when it's running at higher speed because the fan will pull more air through, but we can manage it by altering the field current, which means we can back the amount of charge that comes out of the alternator, therefore stop it working so hard. All right, let's bring the revs up. So we're at, I think we'll go up to maybe 1200. God, it sounds sweet. Let's go a bit more. Let's go 1250-ish. I'll set another 30-minute timer, see how we go. All right, ears on for this next test. Let's go have a bit of a look. So one thing we never anticipated, we actually get sound from the engine room coming up through the throttle. So we have two conduits, one for each Morse cable to go all the way down to the engine room. And sound basically travels all the way up those conduits and comes up to this end of the boat. So we probably want to do something about that. I don't know what we'll do yet, maybe some sort of foam or something we can maybe stick in each conduit so that we can pull it out when we need to, but it also shuts it up. Maybe put some at the engine room end to stop the noise traveling all the way up them. Next test we need to do, I need the batteries full, so I've got solar going in, we've got the alternator going in. I'm going to turn the genset on and we're going to bump this right up. Alright, so let's go and get the genset started up. Doesn't make a lot of sense. We should be getting a lot more. Oh, I bet they are not in bulk. I bet they're in something else. I was thinking we should be getting a lot more amperage coming out of the genset. We don't seem to be having a lot of load, but I don't know. Let's play with some stuff. Let's lose the solar. See if that makes a difference. Yeah, everything else is running as per normal. Right. Solar's off. Okay, now we've got 300 amps coming through and we've got 10 kilowatts. Okay. So, I don't know why, but the solar was screwing it up a bit. So basically, every single engine on the boat is running at the moment. It is noisy, because there's, I don't know, a couple of 100 horsepower or something running. Let's go up and have a gander though. I wanted to have a quick look at the noise coming out of the top end of the boat. Phone's gone flat, so my timer is a little bit off, but we're probably close to 20 minutes now on that main engine at cruise RPM. So we'll go down and do another temperature check on that alternator. I was wrong, 25 minutes. Let's go and do a last couple of checks on it. Shut it down now. I think it's done really well. That's annoying. So it does explain that. So we're having a lovely breakfast this morning. It's French toast, and Duncan's just completely disconnected and started soldering at the breakfast table.
Yep. We're on a tight timeline this morning. Since we're at breakfast and we thought we'd do a little electronics tutorial, this is the exhaust gas temperature module where the thermocouple comes in here. But it wasn't working yesterday. And so I thought it's highly unlikely this thing's blown up or failed. So it turns out this blue wire is broken internally somewhere. And I'm just digging around to see, is it broken there? But no, but I can do continuity tests with the meter. and there is no connection between there and the other end of the blue. So somewhere in there, that wire is broken. Quite bizarre.
So our throttle cable is a little bit loose. So we've got Jess playing the role of clamp.
Yes, like this.
Yeah, look. Alright, there's no bumming around on Brupeg, so let's get straight into it and screw this down. Behind our steering here, we've got a large screw that's holding it in. Can we just do that same check again? Toit like a toiga.
Like a toiga.
Dunk over here is playing with brunette as well as radar. So you can see the radar is overlaying. So this is that radar showing the outline of the river, and you've got a few boats. So you can see these boats randomly with the camera. There we go. Boats over there. They're basically showing up as little dots. So we got. Let's come back down here. There we go. Boat, 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 etc. Where we are. So we've got 3 boats just here. And if we look at here, boat, boat and boat. Are those 3. And then if you sort of zoom in and out, etc. Let me just bring this down. All these little green dots, these are AIS. So Cape Mac, that is, might not be able to see it, it's one of the tugs down the back there called Cape Mac. So it obviously has its AIS transmitting, or up here you can see some of the other ones, Seabird, I don't know, some on the hard stand, etc. So basically when we're out at sea we'll be able to actually see what we're doing, and then you can go into AIS and you can query the target and you can see what's going on. So you can see their AIS number, the type of AIS, where their boat is flagged, their position, how old this data is, what speed they're doing, what course they're doing, how far away they are, etc. So you can basically determine if you're going to knock into somebody in the middle of the ocean by utilising AIS data. The following morning, after you saw the alternator testing while the batteries were down, the batteries are now fully charged. They've been on shore power all night. So what I need to do now is start the engine up, and because the batteries are fully charged, we want this to start turning off and regulating itself. So we want to see basically no amperage coming through this. So yeah, let's start this up. We'll check temperature while it's running. We'll make sure that it's essentially self-regulating. We'll be able to measure the amperage coming out of this to make sure that there's basically nothing. And while that's happening, Duncan is testing our fuel filter delta. So fuel filter sensor here, this is the outlet, and we've got a sensor over the back there which is the inlet, and the difference between them tells us how blocked these filters are. So we've got a manual gauge on either end, so we know what the reading should be. We're going to replicate that in the electronic world so that we can see up on the bridge how blocked these filters are.
Clear prop.
What we're looking for is obviously temperature to make sure we're not going to have an overheating issue. We need to make sure that the amperage starts winding itself down to 0. At the moment we're producing 56 amps going into the battery. The batteries are at 100%, but they're not fully at 100%, and that's why we're still seeing that 56 amps. So we just need to figure out when it shuts down.
So what we think, even though the gauge is showing 100% batteries, we think it might not be 100%. There might be a little bit of extra capacity, and that 50 amps divided by 6 batteries is not a lot per battery. We think that's what might be trickle charging in, so we might have to run the motor a bit longer to be able to do the test properly.
So this is the headline numbers, and then if you look at my phone you can see a bit more detail. So allowed to charge, allowed to discharge. This basically, I believe this turns off if the batteries are chock-a-block and we can't take any more charge. We've got 27.68 volts. I think that needs to go up to 28.00 before it starts to shut things down. So we're very close. 49 amps going in, 50 amps going in right now, or 1300 watts, 1400 watts. So we're blimmin' close to having the batteries chocker. So theoretically, when that gets to 28, it should shut off. But I also think the Belmar is set at 28.7. So we just have to look at that discrepancy to make sure that it's lining up with what the numbers on Victron say. Okay, so 28.03, our current has gone right down to 0.8, so let's go and check it on the engine. .1, that's pretty good. Alright, so that's worked really well. The alternator is switching off when it needs to switch off, when the batteries are full, so that test is successful. So let's shut it down. It's a pretty little motor. Might have seen it, our last drone had a, well, slightly chaotic final last couple of moments, and Consequently, we don't have that drone anymore, but one of our incredibly amazing Patreon crew has got hold of us pretty much straight away and said, hey, I'd like to make sure that you guys have a drone because I really like the drone shots. So can you tell me how much and where it needs to be ordered from, and he'll crack on with it. And this has arrived in the mail. If I figure out how to open it one-handed. This is a slightly different drone than what we had. This is much, much better in high winds and like some of the other scenarios that we're going to end up. It's a much bigger drone. You can see it's like physically 3 times the size of the old one. So this is a beast. This is incredible, and this couldn't have been done without your support. Thank you so much, Donald. This is amazing, buddy.
Thanks, Donald. Oh my God, you're amazing.
Thank you so much. This is incredible.